My name is Amber Dawson. I'm 34 years old, and the morning my sister called to tell me our father was dead, he was sitting 3 feet away from me, stealing bacon off my plate. 6:30 in the morning. I put the call on speaker. "Sis, Dad died last night," Simone said, cold as a bank statement. "He left everything to me and my husband. You get nothing." Behind her, my brother-in-law Braden laughed. "Finally, you're out." My father set down his coffee, leaned toward that phone, and said something I'm not going to repeat yet, because Simone didn't get to hear it that morning, and you'll hear it exactly where she finally did. But here's what none of them knew. The funeral they were already counting money over was happening that Sunday, and Dad had picked out the flowers himself. Lilies. My mother hated lilies. He said she wouldn't mind missing this one. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get loud, with dignity. We tell stories about family, betrayal, and justice done the right way, for everyone who's ever been underestimated at their own kitchen table. If that's you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. 9 months earlier, in October of 2025, my biggest worry was a night shift schedule. I'm a registered nurse. I was working travel contracts out of Columbus, Ohio. 13 weeks here, 13 weeks there. Because travel pay is how a girl from Cedar Falls kills off her nursing school loans before she turns 40. My father thought the whole arrangement was hilarious. "You drive 3 states to give strangers their pills," he'd say, "and I can't get you to change my furnace filter." That was Moses Dawson, 73 years old that fall. Army, 1970 to 1974. He came home, turned wrenches for other people until 1981, then opened Dawson's Garage on Route 9 and ran it for 36 years. He sold it in 2017, retired at 65, and moved exactly nowhere. The same house on Maple Ridge Road he and Mom bought in 1984 and paid off in 2009. He wasn't rich, he was paid off rich, small-town rich. The kind of rich that doesn't show up in a man's shoes but shows up later, in a courthouse. Mom, Carol, died in March of 2023, and Dad grieved the way he fixed engines. Quietly, daily, without asking anyone to watch. Every Saturday night he wound the little brass clock she kept on the mantel, because Carol always said a stopped clock made a house feel dead. He cooked. He drove his 1978 F-150 that he'd restored bolt by bolt. He called me every Sunday, and I called him. We were fine. Everyone was fine. Then, on a bright October afternoon, my 73-year-old father climbed a ladder to clean his own gutters, because asking for help was never going to be his best event. He fell 8 feet and landed wrong. Broken right wrist, the kind that needs a small surgery, plates and pins, 6 to 8 weeks of healing. Not a tragedy. An inconvenience with hardware. I was mid-contract in Texas, and I still made it to the hospital in Cedar Falls inside 48 hours, because that's what you do. When I walked into his room, my sister Simone was already there with flowers, and her tears were arranged as carefully as the flowers. Her husband Braden was shaking the surgeon's hand like he was closing on a duplex. Braden sells mortgages. He has a voice like warm syrup and a handshake he practices. "You fly back to your patients, Amber," he told me, squeezing my shoulder. "Family takes care of family." At the time, it sounded like kindness. It took me months to hear it for what it was, a man assigning himself the keys. I did ask questions before I left. I'm a nurse. Discharge plans are my native language. I asked to see Dad's paperwork, his follow-up schedule, his medication list. Braden smiled and said it was all handled, all filed, all at the house. Simone said, "We've got this, sweetie. You're so far away." Dad, doped and cheerful in the bed, gave me a thumbs up with his good hand. "Go on, kiddo. I'm surrounded by professionals." So I flew back to Texas. I want to be honest with you about that, because it matters later. I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because the 2 people standing closest to him kept telling me everything was handled, and one of them had already decided exactly how handled things were about to get. Dad moved into Simone and Braden's place that November, 15 minutes from his own house. "Just a few weeks," they said, until the cast came off. And here is where the first paper appeared, the honest one. His right hand was in a cast. He couldn't sign checks. He couldn't drive. So Braden brought in a notary and Dad signed a limited power of attorney. Bill paying only, with his clumsy left hand. I want you to hear me clearly. That document was legal, reasonable, and boring. Your own mother would have signed one. I would have. That's what makes this kind of thing work. It never starts with a crime. It starts with a favor. Simone posted a photo that week. Dad at her kitchen table, soup in front of him, caption reading, "Blessed to care for my daddy. Family is everything." 200 likes. Half of Cedar Falls commented hearts. Meanwhile, on a Sunday call, Braden was walking me through their plans and referred to Dad's house, the house on Maple Ridge, the one my parents paid off, as the asset. Dropped casually, the way you'd say, the weather. I noticed it. I even said, "You mean the house?" And he laughed and said, "Realtor brain, sorry." Dad noticed things too, he told me much later. He noticed Braden brought the power of attorney papers to his bedside instead of the kitchen table. He noticed the pen was already uncapped, but his wrist ached. The pain pills made everything feel like a matter for tomorrow, and the paper said what it said. Bills only. He read it twice and signed. It was the last thing they ever showed him before asking him to sign it. Then the wall went up, one polite brick at a time. My Sunday calls started landing on Simone instead of Dad. "He's napping. He's tired, hun. I'll tell him you called." 3 weeks straight, I did not hear my father's actual voice. His old flip phone broke. So I bought him a smartphone, set it up myself, loaded my number, and shipped it to Simone's house. The package went missing. I shipped a second one, with tracking this time. "Delivered," said the email. "Oh, that," Simone said. "Dad didn't want it. You know how he is with technology." My father rebuilt a carburetor the year he turned 70. He is not afraid of a telephone. I knew something was off. I want that on the record. I asked to talk to him directly. I offered to schedule a video call. I asked which doctor was following his wrist so I could call the office, and every single time I hit the same soft wall. "He's resting. We've got it. Why are you being like this?" Here's the thing nobody tells you about situations like ours. When a grown man is legally competent and his caregivers say he's fine, a daughter 2 states away has no lever to pull. There's no agency you call because your sister keeps answering the phone. I was a nurse under contract, 13 weeks locked, with loans to pay, and the only 2 witnesses inside that house kept smiling at me through it. Simone ended one of those calls with a line I've never forgotten. "You chose your career, Amber. Let the people who stayed handle it." I flew home for Christmas anyway, and at that dinner table my father's chair had been moved to the corner. Christmas of 2025. Dad had just turned 74 that December, and the cast was off. But something else had been fitted onto him, a smallness. He sat in the corner of Simone's living room while she answered questions aimed at him. "Dad, how's the wrist?" "It's healing great, isn't it, Daddy?" He was thinner, quieter. His coffee was decaf, doctor's orders, though no doctor of his had ever said so. I got him alone for 10 minutes on the back porch, both of us pretending we needed air in 30-degree weather. He looked at me sideways with the old spark and said, "My checkbook's been on a diet, kiddo." I asked what he meant. He said statements used to come to the house on Maple Ridge. Now everything was paperless, and the passwords lived with Braden. He'd asked to see the accounts twice. Both times, Braden clapped him on the shoulder and said, "That's what you got me for." I went back inside and asked Simone calmly in the kitchen if we could all sit down after the holidays and go over Dad's finances together. Braden materialized like he'd been summoned. "Family doesn't need lawyers, Amber, unless you're accusing somebody." Notice the move. I asked about statements. He introduced the word lawyers. Then Simone started crying, right on schedule, about everything she does, about how nobody appreciates the person who stayed, and my father, because he is decent, and because decent men make soft hostages, patted my arm and said, "I'm fine, kiddo. Don't start a war at Christmas." On January 6th, I signed another 13-week contract in Texas. I've signed a lot of paperwork in my life. That was the most expensive signature of mine you'll hear about tonight. By February, the Sunday calls had gone from screen to scripted, and I'd had enough. I took 4 days off between shifts, told nobody, and flew home. My little ambush of love. Simone opened her door surprised and recovered fast. Oh no, you just missed him. He's on an overnight fishing trip with the VFW boys. Bad timing, sweetie. Fishing. In Ohio. In February. I drove to Dad's house on Maple Ridge and stood in the yard a while. Grass gone shaggy under the frost. Mailbox stuffed. Curtains shut tight. A house holding its breath. On the way out of town, I stopped for gas and ran into Earl Prescott. My father's oldest friend, 75 years old, ran the Prescott Funeral Home for 4 decades before his sons took it over, buried half of Cedar Falls with his own hands and cried at most of them. Earl looked at me strangely. Moses hasn't been to a post meeting in 3 months, honey. We figured he moved in with you. Not on a fishing trip with them? Not at meetings at all. I called Simone from the gas station lot. She didn't even pause. Oh, it's not the VFW crowd, it's his other buddies. You don't know them. A lie stacked neatly on a lie, like cordwood. I flew back to Texas with my stomach in a knot, and 3 days later Simone texted me a photo. Dad in an armchair, smiling thinly, holding that day's mood hostage. Dad's doing great, stop checking up on us. I stared at that picture a long time. There was a detail in it. Small, ordinary, right there in the background, that I wouldn't understand for another 5 months. When I finally did, it changed how I saw every photo she'd ever sent. My contract ended the first week of May 2026, and I came home to Columbus with a plan to drive to Cedar Falls unannounced and refused to leave without seeing my father. The phone rang before I'd unpacked. June Hetler, a nurse I'd worked med-surg with years ago, 58, sharp as a lancet. The kind of woman who notices everything and forgives most of it. She'd taken a job at a long-term care facility called Crest Haven Manor, out near the Indiana line, 170 miles from my kitchen. Her voice was careful. Amber, there's a resident here, came in back in March. He asks every nurse on every shift if they know a nurse named Amber. Says she's his daughter. I couldn't speak. June kept going. Gentle, professional. His name is Moses Dawson, honey. Is that your father? I stood in the middle of my kitchen with my keys still in my hand. Nobody had said the words nursing home to me. Not once, not in any call, not in any text. As far as I'd been told, my father was eating pot roast 15 minutes from his own house. June said one more thing before I hung up, and it's the thing that put me in the car. Amber. He doesn't present like a placement. He presents like somebody misplaced him. I didn't call Simone. I didn't call Braden. There are conversations you have by phone, and there are conversations you have in person, in daylight, with paperwork. I got in the car. Before I tell you what I found in that building, let me say this to every one of you with an aging parent. Ask them today, kindly, over coffee. Who holds your power of attorney, and have you seen your own bank statement this month? Not to accuse anyone, just to know. It's the one question I didn't ask in time, and it cost my father everything but his life. If this story is hitting home, take 2 seconds and hit subscribe, because what my father did when he got out deserves witnesses, and you're going to want to be one of them. 3 hours of highway, and I spent every mile of it being a nurse, because being a daughter would have put me in a ditch. Crest Haven Manor sat off a county road behind a sign with 2 burned-out letters. Inside, the smell hit first. Cheap disinfectant over something older. A call light blinking down the hall with nobody moving toward it. A television talking to a row of empty chairs. I counted staff the way I count on every unit I've ever walked. 1 aide for a wing that needed 4. The medication cart parked and locked at 11 in the morning with the 9 o'clock meds still signed out as pending. I don't say any of this to shame the aides. Understaffed people can't pour from an empty building. I say it because my father had been living in it for 10 weeks, while my sister posted about family being everything. He was in a shared room at the end of the East Hall. Second bed, by the window that didn't open. My father, Moses Dawson, who once carried an engine block across a shop floor out of pure stubbornness, was maybe 15 pounds lighter, gray stubble on his jaw, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize that fit him like a borrowed apology. But his eyes came up when the door opened, and his eyes were his eyes. Sharp, whole, present. He looked at me a long second, and what he said first broke me worse than tears would have. "Took you long enough, kiddo. They told me you knew. Told me you signed off on it." They hadn't just hidden him from me.